Now it's time for Top Story here on France 24, and today we're looking at the ongoing efforts by Mali to seize back control of its occupied north. An area, of course, as we always say, larger than France, from radical Islamists who've terrorised local residents with amputations, stonings and floggings. Well, for more, I'm joined here in the studio by International Affairs Editor Doug Herbert. Good to have you with us, as ever, Doug.
Morning, Stuart.
It's been a week since Mali, France and a host of African nations led calls for this regional intervention force to drive these Islamists out. Is there any sign yet that it's actually going to happen?
Yeah, it looks like one of these classic cases of foot dragging, right? Because here we were a week ago. Remember the UN General Assembly? We heard Mali making that very stringent call. We need a force in there. We need it now. Calling on Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the international community, please go in there. France was behind it. The West African nations seemed behind it. And now here we are talking about a week later. So what's going on? What's going on is that it's much easier said than done when it comes to actually logistically getting this intervention force up and running. Tomorrow at the UN Security Council, the 5 permanent members are set to hold what they're calling preliminary discussions, talks about talks, basically, on the logistics of this force. And the problem here is a lot of people, a lot of its members are very much divided, a lot of reservations, because while it looks and sounds great on paper, who doesn't want to drive the hardline radical Islamists out and stop those amputations, stonings, and floggings that you talked about? Of course, Mali wants its government back. The people want their lives back in the north. That's become more and more clear from the reports we've seen. The problems are, as one UN official, Security Council official put it, what has not been clarified is who does what does the operation look like, how much does it cost, what's the scale of the operation? We have very little actual concrete commitment from the members who would be participating in the so-called ECOWAS group of West African nations. We don't know who's going to pay for what, who's going to contribute how many troops. We've talked about that number of 3,000 troops, 3,300. How many will actually end up on the ground? Who's ready to actually put the boots there?
You mentioned the UN Security Council. US, of course, one of those 5 permanent members. They've been very cautious, haven't they? Absolutely.
Now, look, the US has been very clear. It acknowledges a need for military action. The problem is it thinks that preliminary to that action, you need to have the restoration of what it calls a credible civilian democratic constitutional government in Mali. It says unless you have the restoration of a government that has legitimacy and credibility, no Malian army is going to be able to or have the capability of leading an operation to drive out, to free the north, so to speak, to drive out the Islamists. So there's really 4 planks to the U.S. platform. It's basically saying, yeah, we want the Islamists out, but governance must come first. Get Mali's government in the capital, Bamako, up and running, working. There's still a big divide between the government and the former putschists who are still on the sideline, the former military coup leader who was never for military intervention. The Tuaregs, the people who originally were demanding a homeland before they were muscled aside by more radical Islamists, they've been marginalized. They need to have their situation sorted out too, politically, preferably not militarily. The U.S. wants to pursue those terrorist groups, as we said, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, the North African branch of Al-Qaeda, as well as Mujwa, another very hardline group. They need to be out of there, and that will take security and military action. Finally, the humanitarian crisis. What would arise as a result of any displacement of people from military action, and also the shortage of range, which has made crops and food very hard to come by.
France is stuck between a rock and a hard place as well, isn't it? Because on the one hand, it said it wants the Islamists out, but it doesn't want to be seen to be being too belligerent.
Yeah, briefly here. France has hostages in Mali. We know that. It's very wary of doing anything that would kick up the Islamists and basically lead them to perhaps kill those hostages in a worst-case scenario, obviously. Also wary of blundering in and being seen as a new neo-colonialist France coming in and lording it over the realm as it was accused of doing in the old days. The ECOWAS force itself, France would have to obviously provide logistics, whether it's intelligence training, air cover, transporting troops to the terrain. That's going to be needed. No one really knows, though, who's going to do what yet.
And France 24 also reporting that there are some negotiations going on with the Islamists. This is involving Algeria.
Absolutely. Algeria is the absolute key to any resolution of this conflict. Almost anyone will tell you that. Algeria itself has been accused of spawning the very jihadist movements they're now trying to dislodge from the north, being complicit in the kidnappings, the arms, and the drug trafficking. What France 24 has been able to report is basically Malian official told AFP last Saturday that Algeria was sponsoring secret talks on its soil between a Malian official in Bamako and members of Ansar Dina, one of those radical Islamist groups that they're trying to drive out of the north. Frans van Katz was able to confirm this with a person who is familiar with the matter. You can find both of those stories on our website. Algeria, just to be clear, has always been opposed to military intervention. It doesn't want anything on its borders, and as we said, there's a very complicated history there. Some people say it's in bed with a lot of these traffickers and these Islamists. It wants a negotiated settlement. It wants a negotiated solution. It doesn't want to see soldiers from ECOWAS or anywhere else in Mali on its borders. Mauritania, another country that has a long border with Mali, is going to be another key to resolving this conflict.
Easy to find that on our website, as Doug says, France24.com. Have a look at that. You'll find that on there. Doug, thanks very much.